Guys, as promised, here's a video of my sock knitting machine. These are just a few of the tools that I use that came with mine. I have here the bobbin winder in the back that attaches to a chair. The leather strap broke, so I just replaced it with an elastic band. Here. This is to grip onto the heel when you're doing the heel or toe, and you can add weight onto this thing. And there's a few little needly type things here. This one's my favorite. Use it to help pick up stitches and transfer ones. This is a little cast-on basket, and some people use a bonnet, but I prefer to use this one instead. And you'll see how that's used in a little bit. I have, these are the weights and weight holders. So this will hook on. The weights look like this, and you can add or move them around as you so desire. This is my sock setup here. I use an old sewing table, and I've attached my machine. See it go. This one came with a Super Duty yarn holder, and while it looks very impressive, it's kind of very annoying because it's uber big, and I really only use one slot. Once I've done a pattern, maybe use two of them, but really this is, for me, this is overkill. Okay, I'm just gonna try a short little video on, I guess, how I make my socks. Everyone is different. Everyone will find their own pattern, their own way of doing it, their own style. Personally, for me, I prefer to start with the toe and work my way up. To start, I'm just gonna thread my yarn through the yarn carrier. Pardon my big hands. And this is just scrap yarn, because you will need to cut it and junk it. So this is my yarn basket here. So I'll hold this in the middle with my left hand, and with the long tail that I've pulled through the yarn carrier, I will then wrap the yarn around the yarn basket, around a needle. Basket, needle, basket, needle. And you can skip one stitch, whoops, without any ramifications, but if you skip more than one stitch, then you're gonna land up with stitches that have been dropped. I will show you, I'll skip a couple there. And you'll keep doing this all the way around until they're all cast on. Some people don't use the cast-on basket. Instead, they've made themselves a bonnet from yarn, and they will then pick up loops on the bonnet and put them over the needles. I don't have one. I could make one, but I choose not to. I just don't. I think this works just fine. So then, when I have enough cast on, and this is now in my way, I can proceed to knit. And then I can finish up this. And you'll notice where we skipped all those stitches, the stitches aren't picking up, so we'll have to go back and we'll fix that. Could just fix it right now with this yarn. And the tail can just go in the middle. Then we'll take our weights that we have and we'll hook them onto the bottom of the basket here. If we don't have weights, we won't have the correct tension, and this will not work. So with my scrap yarn here, I'm just going to knit a few rounds. You can see here, that this needs to be fixed. So with my special tool here, just go like that. We have another one over here that needs working with the practice yarn. Allows you to see where you've dropped stitches, where you need to add, so that when you get to your sock, you won't have them and won't be any problems. See, I'm at the end of my tail here, and my scrap yarn. So as you can see here, I put markings. Maybe you can't really see. But this is one here, this yellow one, and this yellow one here tell me where my heel is going to be. Then I have two other markings on both sides here and here, which show me the halfway points. So my heel and toe will all be worked on this side, while this side will be put out of work. So to do the toe, I will raise all the stitches on the back, or sorry, all the needles. so that they will be out of work and I can finish the row. Take this yarn, throw it in the middle. Now I've thread my good yarn that I'm going to use to make my sock, and I will now thread that through the yarn carrier. And, oops, put the yarn tail down on the inside of the sock machine. Now I can start to work on my sock. So, start with the first row. To make the toes, I usually wrap this stitch around that one just to make sure that it's not gonna leave a little hole there. Then I will just go back and forth. This one I will wrap the stitch as well as raise this needle here. There we go. And then I'll keep raising one needle on each side as I work my way down to these two markers here. After a while I will notice that the tension will not be strong enough on this side to make sure that the yarn stays on the needle, so I will have to attach my handy dandy heel or toe hook to add the weights to it to keep it down. So you can just push it through the yarn, hook it on, and then pull down, and then add the weight. Oops. Then I will simply raise a needle on each side and work my way to the markers. When I get to this point where I have to raise the needle just to the inside of this yellow mark, and I've already raised the needle on the inside of the right side yellow mark, I'll know it's time to start shaping the rest of the toe. So I will now increase the stitches, and I do this by raising one and lowering two. So this will wrap the stitches around so you won't get weird looking holes in your toes. There are many different ways to do this. This is the way that I experimented with and found that works for me. I'm sure everyone else will have their own different methods. So raise one, lower two. And keep repeating this back and forth. Raise one, lower two. Always make sure that when you lower them that the hooks are open, otherwise you will lose a stitch. They aren't that hard to pick up again. I'm coming towards the end. I just lowered the last two stitches on this side before the yellow mark, and on this side I only have 2 stitches left. So I'll go across, then I will raise one, and I will lower the last 2 stitches before the yellow mark, go all the way across, and then I just like to take the yarn and wrap it around the needle that was raised, and then go all the way across here, stop here, lower all the stitches on the back, and now it'll be time for me to pick up the stitches at the front of the toe that are in here and put them on the needles in the back. This will automatically close the toe, and I will not have to do any Kitchener stitching later on. Some methods, you just make a whole tube, like you make a long tube of like 20 socks all in a row. You'll cut the scrap yarn, and then you'll have to Kitchener stitch all the toes closed. I don't like doing that, so I prefer to cast on each sock individually, make them like this, and it saves me from the hours of Kitchener stitching that I would have to do otherwise. So I remove all my weights. And then I like to actually remove the basket. So I can just take one of my tools here and remove the yarn just because it gets in my way. And then we are done. We are done with this thing. Now comes the fun part. I'm going to take my hook tool and I'm going to pull this yarn up a little bit. Careful not to pull it right off all the needles. This is why it's good to use a different contrasting color yarn for your scrap yarn, so you can easily see where one yarn begins and the other ends. So I start on the right side and I just take my good tail out and leave this junk yarn tail in. And what I want to do is find the little loops where, I don't know if you can see that. I'll show you on the other side. There's one loop here. I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to put it over the first needle on the other side of the yellow mark, so the back half. Then I'm going to keep going through. It's hard to show you. See if I can zoom in. So you can see a stitch here. Pick up this loop and put it over the next needle. I'm going to find the next stitch, pick it up, and put it over the next needle, and keep doing this all the way across. It's a bit tedious, but if it saves me from doing the Kitchener stitch, I am all for it. And this is my last stitch. So now I have picked up all my stitches from the top of the toe that I started with, and I have put them on all the needles in the back row. Now I get to start cranking out the foot portion of the sock. I'm going to put some of my weights on the inside. What I like to do also with the tail, I will wrap it around a couple of the needles so that it just gets tied off and I don't have to worry about it later. Everyone, I'm sure, will do this differently. I just like to secure it extra just in case. Okay, I don't know where my camera cut off. Anyway, I just finished hanging all the stitches on the back needles. I put my weights into the toe of the sock, and I now just finished 2 rows of the foot portion of the sock. This is where I refer to my pattern that I did with all my math, and then see how many rows I have to crank out. So that was 2. So now that I completed doing all my rows for the foot portion, I will stop in the middle of where I do my heel and toe, and then I will raise all the stitches on the back. Before I do the heel, I'm going to lower the first 2 stitches of all my raised needles on either side. I will then go complete the circuit and then raise these 2, and then raise these ones on this side. This wraps the heel and helps prevent that hole that forms. So like the toe, it's gonna be very similar. I'm just gonna raise one needle on each side as I make a pass. Raise a needle. Raise. Eventually we will have to add on. This is the heel weights again. Now I get to the point where I raise the needle just on the inside of this yellow mark, go across, and then I will proceed to raise one, lower two, as I work the rest of the heel. Again, make sure that your needles stay open, and then adjust your weights. Adjust the weights as necessary. One up, two down. One up, two down. One up, two down. I'll raise one up, two down, go all the way across. Now just bring the yarn over the last needle and stop in the midpoint. Lower all the needles in the back, making sure that they're all open. And then I've just completed my heel. So now I can count how many stitches I want to do on the ankle part of the foot. So then I'll just count out how many rows I want in that. Now that I've counted out how many rows I want for the portion of the sock between, no, you can't really see, between the heel and the cuff, so this part here, then I'm going to do the cuff part. For the cuff, I'm doing a faux 1x1 rib. It's going to look like this. I'm not actually using the ribber attachment, so it will not be a true rib. It is basically, I take out every other needle and it just looks like a rib, and it has the same function. Just a bit looser looking. So then proceed to raise every other needle. And you can have fun with how many needles you raise, how many you leave down, do a 2x1, 3x1, whatever your heart desires. And then I have to take the needles out. There is a spring that runs along here that holds the needles in place. So I have to run that hook along here to pull it out. I can just pull my needles up and just drop them for a second. So I'll have to work in portions here, so I'll take the needle and I can simply, oh you can't really see, slide the stitch on to the needle next to it. And I'll do this all the way around until I get back to here. Once I've worked a small portion, I can move the yarn carrier ahead, and now I can do this side. Alright, now that I have removed every other needle and I have hung the stitch that was on that needle on the needle next to it, I can now work my 1x1 faux rib for, I'm doing 60 stitches because when I fold it in half it will only be 30 stitches high. I just finished working 60, so I will then remove the weights from the inside of my sock as well as the outside, being very careful not to drop any of these stitches up here. So I can show you this. This is the regular knit here, and this is the 1x1 rib. So you can see it's a lot looser than the other one, but we're doubling it up in thickness. So we are going to take these stitches, we're going to pull it up the inside of the cylinder, and we're going to hang these stitches on the needles that are there, and it will create a nice finish for the inside of our sock. So now very carefully I'm going to reach in and pull up. This is where I normally drop a lot of stitches. So I'll try not to. There we go. I've got it to where on the inside I can see I have my regular stitches. The lighting is horrible. My regular stitches and my 1x1 full rib. I'm gonna try and find a single row all the way across that to me it looks like where excuse me, it looks like where the regular rib and the 1x1 have joined. You'll kind of be able to tell a difference, and I will then pick up that stitch and hook it on the needles. Once I get toward where my yarn carrier is, I'm going to obviously have to knit some so I can have access to these stitches. So with my hands, I'm just going to hold down the yarn on the inside and move my yarn carrier. Then I can hang the rest of my stitches. Now that I've hung all my stitches, I will grab onto the bottom of the sock and pull it down, work my way here, stop, and then I will lift up all the stitches starting at this yellow marker on this side here. I will lift them up to put them out of work, because then our sock is done. Now I'll finish. And now comes the fun part, casting off. So you can use a crochet hook. I will use one of my hooks that I use for the knitting machine. I'll take my hook, I'll have the yarn on the outside here. If I bend this hook forward a little bit, I can stick this one into the stitch and I can pull the yarn through. I don't want to pull it super tight, otherwise it will be rather constricting, so I'll keep it loose. Pull the yarn through, and I will do this all the way around the top of the sock, and then it's done. Once I have finished crocheting my loop through, I can just push the stitches down. So I keep doing that. You can push the needles down. Doing the very last needle here on this side of the yellow. Pull it through, and now I can cut my thread. I put the tail on the inside. I put all my needles down and just turn the crank once, possibly twice. Unhook that. It's being stubborn. And of course my camera battery has to die just before I finish recording. So I've taken the sock off and I just have the last loop here, and you can just finish it off. I just crochet it in once or twice and just make a little chain loop however you like. Pull it through, make the end tight, and voila, and then I can just cut off the remainder. So here we have our sock fresh off of the machine. What we have to do at the very beginning, remember we had this junk yarn that was on here? What we're going to do is snip it off. We're going to open it up a little bit like this and just take the scissor and just make sure you just snip the stitches right alongside the blue yarn. You don't have to snip all of them, just enough, and then you can pull it right off. Flip it over, do the exact same thing on the other side. You can see that this saves us from doing the Kitchener stitch. So trim. While you can't do a huge long tube of socks with this method, I still think, for me personally, I would rather do one sock at a time and not have to sit there for hours Kitchener stitching, if that's a word now. There, once you've cut off all your yarn, you can save this for future projects, or if it gets too small, throw it out. So with our sock, we have all these fuzzies in here, so we can just pull them out. You may have to flip the sock inside out to get the ones on the inside that are harder to pull. And then you're gonna have a finished sock. So here on the inside, you can see we have some more fuzzies to pull out. I'm going to check that the socks are matched, so you can line up the toes and the heel, and you can see that we have a wonderful pair of matched socks. Here's the cuff, and it's a rolled cuff, so the seam is way down there on the inside. This is nice and fluffy. So yeah, that's it. That's how we make our socks with no Kitchener stitch. Yay! Here are the toes. So you can't even tell where we would have had this Kitchener stitch. It's all done for you. How wonderful. So that's it. That's how I make a pair of socks on a vintage sock knitting machine. Thanks for watching! Here's an example of some of the socks that I've done. Now, some people are asking about width. You can totally adjust the width. For example, here underneath, this is the size 13 sock you just saw me make. And this one, if I line it up here, this is the foot part. You can totally see that you can get varying widths, varying lengths, different styles for different feet. This one's a lot smaller. This one my husband loves. They're his socks. As time goes on, like as you wear them, they will stretch out and relax a little bit. You can see this one here is quite relaxed in the ankle and cuff part, but once you wash them, they will, I'm going to say, trim up, or they will return back to their normal size. They wash really well, super easy. Just throw them in the washing machine. I don't wash them super hot, but you can do warm, cool, and I just hang them to dry. You can see this one is also stretched out, but I love this color. It's one of my favorites. And yeah, it's basically the sky's the limit. You can totally have fun. Apparently you can also do mitts on this machine as well. I have yet to do mitts, And when I got the instruction book, it has a whole ton of other things that you're supposed to apparently be able to do with this machine, but I have not yet done those.